In today's podcast, you'll learn words and expressions connected to arts and crafts, from sketch to sculpture. We hope you find this episode handy. Welcome to this artistic episode of
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello and welcome, especially if you're a new listener to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with nearly 60 years of teaching between us, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. How are you doing, Reza?
I'm doing very well. And yourself?
I'm fine, doing really good. Excited to be talking about arts and crafts. And what does that word handy mean in the introduction?
Well, I'm sure most people know the word hand, that part of the body. So useful for doing so many things. So if something is handy, it's very useful. It's a very useful thing. It's handy. For example, I could say to you, when I was young, I lived a 5-minute walk away from my school. That was very handy. It was very useful. It was very convenient. So we're hoping that this episode will be handy for you.
Useful.
It'll be useful. Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose that's where you get the word handyman, someone who's very good with tools and with their hands. Now, this topic today, arts and crafts, has been kindly suggested by a friend of the show, Carmen from Malaga. So thank you very much, Carmen, for your suggestion. Reza, did you do arts and crafts at school as a subject?
Well, I broken up into some of its components. We didn't do arts and crafts as such. We did art and we did, for example, woodwork. And for a while, I went to sewing classes in primary school.
What does sewing mean?
So sewing, SEWING to SEW, sew is to use a needle and thread to do things with clothes, like you sew on buttons. Yeah, so if a button falls off your shirt and you want to put it back on again, you need a needle, that sharp thing, and a thread, that little like a tiny miniature piece of rope, and you use that to put the button back on. That is to sew. In primary school, I did sewing class. One of the most useful things.
Very useful.
I'm a pretty good stitcher. I'm a pretty good sewer. Even today, I'm pretty handy with a needle and thread. I'm good at buttons and things like that.
I must say I've never, ever noticed you with a shirt that has a missing button. Every shirt that you've ever worn has had all its buttons. So it was a very useful topic to study at school. So let's look at some vocabulary that might be handy for you on this topic of arts and crafts. If something is made by hand, then you may not be surprised to know that the adjective is handmade. So you can have a handmade mug, for example, when you drink your coffee. You can have a handmade bowl or a handmade pencil case. So it's something that's been made by hand and not by machine. And a person who works with their hands and creates things in a very skilled, talented way, working with natural materials usually, you could call this person an artisan. They are craftsmen or craftswoman. So a person who creates things using their hands, a very skillful way of creating things. Do you know any craftsmen or craftswomen?
I don't think I do personally. Do you?
I do. I have actually a very close friend coming to see me next week, and she is a craftswoman. She makes ceramics by hand. So she actually makes bowls and other useful utensils for the kitchen. And she will look at the vocabulary later, but she makes it from clay, and she makes ceramics that are very useful in the house.
So she has a certain level of craftsmanship.
Exactly. Oh, and I know another person, Denise, a student who's in my conversation group at the moment. She lives in Greece, and she has a lovely webpage that I'll link to in the show notes where you can buy handmade jewellery. So she's another craftswoman.
Oh, wow. Yes, please do give me that link.
Beautiful jewellery, absolutely amazing stuff. And she makes it all by hand.
So I bet Denise has a high level of craftsmanship. A craftsman, we already said, can be a person who is involved with crafts, and their craftsmanship is the quality and the skill shown in the things that they make. Yeah. The quality of their work, the product of their work is the craftsmanship that they display.
An acronym that we've spoken about before on this podcast is DIY. In fact, I think we've done a whole episode on DIY, which is do it yourself. That's when you make things by yourself using your hands. And for example, if you have a problem with your plumbing at home or your electrics in your flat, or there's something wrong with the heating or the air conditioning, if you fix it yourself, if you're painting your house, if you're changing the windows, anything that you do yourself in your house is DIY, do it yourself. In fact, the podcast that we spoke about DIY, I've just checked the number of it. It's 182. So go to inglespodcast.com/182 and you can hear a lot more vocabulary specifically about DIY and home improvement.
Craig asked me right at the beginning of the episode if I had learned arts and crafts in school. Yes, I said one of the things I did at school was woodwork. So obviously that means making things with wood. It's all one word, WOODWORK, woodwork.
And similar to woodwork is wicker work, WICKER, wicker work. So it's also making things by hand and making things with a material that's similar to wood, but it's not exactly hardwood from trees. It's bendy, thin pieces of wood, very thin strips of wood. And these long, thin pieces of wood are very flexible and you can intertwine them, which means you wind them together to make a basket, for example. And that's wicker work.
Upcycling is very important in the world of arts and crafts. If you upcycle something, it means that you reuse something in a way that increases its value. So it's not exactly just general recycling. Recycling is just using it again. To specifically upcycle is to reuse something. It could be the whole of something, or it could be just the part of something, and the other parts you don't use, just one part of something, and you do something with it which makes it more valuable than it was before. You increase its value. That is to upcycle.
For example, you could take an old pair of jeans that have holes in them and you could make a bag from the denim, from the jeans. Or you could reuse an old jam jar or an old glass jar as a storage container for nuts or for buttons or screws or something.
I've heard a thing that they do quite often in some African countries is to upcycle old car tires. That the black material which is around the edge of a wheel of a car.
The rubber.
And what they do with that rubber is they make shoes out of it.
Yeah.
When you get a big tire, the big piece of rubber, you could make, about 10 or 12 pairs of shoes. So those 10 or 12 pairs of shoes are worth a lot more than the tire was worth when it was a tire.
Yeah. And you could make 20 pairs in a good year.
Oh, very good. A good year. A type of tire. Oh, that was a good one.
Textiles. What are textiles? Textiles are different types of cloth or fabric. Cotton, for example, is a textile. Also wool that you wear in the winter, or silk, velvet, suede. All of those fabrics are different types of textiles.
Another material which is essential, I would say, to everyday life is leather, Leather. So leather is the skin of an animal which has been taken off the dead animal and is used to make things. And if you're involved in that, that is leatherworking. Could be lots of things. Leatherworking could mean making shoes, making bags, and a whole variety of other things. So leatherworking is making things with leather, which is the skin of an animal without any hair. Because if the skin has hair, then we call it fur. But we're talking about without the hair. Leatherworking.
And if you use the underside of the leather, so not the side that's facing outwardly from the animal, but the inside of the skin of the animal, that's suede, isn't it? That's called suede.
Is that what suede is? I knew
Yeah.
it came from leather, but I wasn't quite sure.
It's the inside of the skin, not the outside.
Suede, that's SUEDE, by the way. Strange spelling.
Blue suede shoes.
Don't step on them.
Don't step on them.
That's what Elvis said.
You probably know the word to draw. You take a pencil or something similar, you can draw a picture. There's a similar word which is sketch, which is a kind of drawing, but maybe more simple or quicker. So a quick sketch, SKETCH, sketch is making an image of something very quickly and very roughly. Another word that's useful is to doodle, DOODLE, which is to write something or draw something on a piece of paper in an abstract way. So you're not focusing on what you're doing, you're just doing it to pass the time or maybe as a distraction from doing something else. Are you a doodler? Do you doodle?
No, I don't doodle much, but I occasionally sketch. And speaking of sketch, Craig, a belated happy birthday. Craig was 62 yesterday. Can I say that? Do you mind if I tell?
You've just said it.
I've done it now.
Okay. You asked me if you can say it after you've said it.
Well, of course, there's always the power of editing. So if you don't hear it, so it's a bit absurd that I'm having this conversation, because if you don't hear it, it means it's been edited out. So you won't be hearing it anyway, will you?
No.
Craig, you're 62 now. It was your birthday yesterday. Would you say your memory still as good as ever, or is it now a little bit sketchy?
Oh, a sketchy memory. That's a good use of the word. Well, definitely sketchy. I find it difficult to remember names sometimes, but I suppose, that's inevitable. That's going to happen with age, with advancing years. So if you have a sketchy memory, then you can't always recall or remember things instantly. It takes time for you to remember things. It's a sketchy memory.
Yeah, that will help you remember what a sketch is. So a sketch is art, but without all the details. You haven't got every single detail there. You got most of it, but not all of it. So it's a sketch. So if your memory's sketchy, you've got some of the things you remember, but perhaps not all of them in detail.
Yeah, that's me. A very sketchy memory. Mosaic is another form of arts and crafts. A mosaic is a picture made by putting small pieces of glass or tile. Tile is a ceramic that you often find in the bathroom or the kitchen, or maybe stone. And you can mix these different elements or different materials together and make a mosaic, which is a collection of coloured pieces of glass or tile or stone.
Collage, that's COLLAGE, is a word connected to art. It's a piece of art made by sticking different materials on a surface. So rather than just one work of art that was done in one piece of paper or one piece of cloth, it could be 2 or 3 or 5 or 50 or 700 things all stuck together. And that forms a new work of art, which is all those things put together. So it could be, for example, 25 photographs all stuck on a piece of paper. Or it could be little pieces of other works of art, which for artistic reasons you've broken into fragments and then you stick all the fragments together. That would be a collage. So it's lots of bits of other things all stuck together to make a whole new thing. And the new thing is the collage.
I remember doing that at school. We had to do class collages where all the students would come together and make one big collage in the classroom on the back wall. I remember doing that. That was quite fun. One thing we didn't do at school is embroidery, because it wasn't really popular when I was at school. And I think also it's something that tends not to be taught to boys, strangely. But embroidery is where you're stitching decorative shapes or letters onto fabric. So Reza mentioned before needle and thread. You'd take your needle, your thin piece of metal, and with colored threads or very, very long, thin pieces of material, you would create an image or maybe your initials, the initials of your name, in my case, CW, and you would embroider those letters on a handkerchief or on a shirt or on a piece of material.
Yes, I said that I wasn't bad at sewing, sewing, which also uses a needle and thread, but that's for purely practical things. So you sew a button on a shirt, for example, but embroidery is the more artistic side, as Craig said, initials, and I couldn't do that. That requires a lot more skill, which I don't have.
That's very skillful, isn't it? Did you know that I have a black belt?
I've got a black belt, a brown belt, and a beige belt. What's your black belt in?
Well, you know, some people have a black belt in karate or judo.
Yeah.
I have a black belt in origami.
Really?
No, it's a joke. It's a very bad joke. Origami is the Japanese art of paper folding. So you fold paper and create images of animals, for example, and it's a very relaxing, intricate, and quite difficult art form, origami, creating forms and shapes from folding paper.
So it's a Japanese word that's got directly into English, hasn't it?
Yeah. So is judo.
Yeah, judo and a few others. Karate.
Karate means open hand, I think.
Is that what it means? Kamikaze, tsunami. Quite a few Japanese words. The next word isn't Japanese, though. It's a very British word. It's a very British pastime. A pastime is a thing you do in your free time. And that is pottery. Pottery. So pottery can be the activity or it can be the actual objects made from a material called clay, Clay. So clay is basically brown material that is lying there in the ground. So in soft ground, if you were to stick in your hand and take out this brown material, more or less that's clay.
Looks like mud, doesn't it?
It looks like mud, but if you were to put that on a wheel and spin it around and do something with it, now you can call it clay. So if you make things from clay, you are a potter. Not Harry Potter. No, Harry Potter's a very famous fictional character, but a real potter is a person involved in pottery who makes things with clay on a wheel, and then they harden the object with heat in some kind of oven where the heat will make the clay go hard, and they make the pottery that way.
And that was what I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that my friend does. She makes ceramics by firing the pottery in a kiln. Kiln, that's the name of the oven that works at a very high temperature and makes the clay go very hard.
Craig, you can also make objects in an artistic way without using any heat whatsoever. What would that be?
Yes, you can have a big block of clay or marble or other material, and you can take pieces away from that block to make an image, like someone's head, for example, or someone's body. And that's called sculpting, which is shaping something by carving or molding, or very often removing things from a square block so that you've got an image of something else. And the person who does that sculpting is called a sculptor, ending in OR, a person who sculpts.
And what do you call the thing that they sculpt?
A sculpture. So the spelling is SCULPTURE, but there's a ch sound in there. So it's not sculptor, that's the person, it's sculpture. And that URE sound at the end is the famous schwa, the very weak sounding sculpture.
It's very, very difficult to hear the difference between the person, a sculptor, and the work that they produce, sculpture.
It's the ch that's different, isn't it?
One is a t and the other is a ch. That's the only difference. The rest is identical. Sculptor, sculpture. It's very difficult to hear the difference.
Sculptor, sculpture. Let's take a quick break here because I know you listen to this podcast to take your English to the next level. But what about your speaking? Is your fluency improving? Are you happy with your speaking skills? My conversation course focuses on making you a more confident and more fluent English speaker. You'll join me and a small group of motivated students, and we'll meet on Zoom and have topical discussions, role plays, debates, and presentations that will expand your vocabulary and help you express yourself effectively in English. So be proactive and take the first step towards becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. Send me an email today to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll send you details of the next online conversation course. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the podcast. Next word we have for you is stencil, stencil. Remember, you can see all of these words listed for your convenience on the website. Go to inglespodcast.com/576 and you'll see these words and their definitions. A stencil is a template that you use when you want to draw or paint a shape. For example, imagine you want to draw a triangle. Maybe you have a plastic stencil that you put on the paper, and then you take your pencil and you draw around that piece of plastic that's in the shape of a triangle, and as if like magic, you have a perfect triangle. So a stencil can be any shape of anything, even letters, and you draw around them and they give you a perfect shape.
A bead, B-E-A-D, is a colourful, usually colourful, ball used in an artistic way. So beading is decorating with these small, colourful beads. That's called beading.
Another craft is knitting, which is something my mum used to do. Knitting. Notice that the K at the beginning there is silent. We don't pronounce it. It's knitting. And we mentioned needles before when you're sewing. Knitting needles are very similar, but they're much, much bigger. So you take wool and you take 2 knitting needles, and then you can make things by looping or connecting the yarn or wool, and different patterns and different shapes and different colors can be combined to make sweaters and gloves and lots of different things. Although, unfortunately, my mum could only make one thing, and that was a scarf, because it was really easy. So we had lots of different scarves and my mum used to sit for hours making these very long scarves, but she didn't really know how to make anything more complicated.
Now, you said your mum, like quite a few mums, was a good knitter. Another thing mothers are very good at with the sons is nitpicking. Was she a good nitpicker?
Yes. Well, what's a nitpicker?
So a nitpicker is not the same as a knitter. A knitter knits. A nitpicker is someone who finds things to criticize and everything.
Oh, she was good at that as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Mums tend to be very good nitpickers with the son. They'll always find something that you could do better, something to criticize you about, a slight problem, a way that you could improve. Mums, as well as knitters, are often nitpickers.
In fact, she often used to nitpick as she was knitting.
I bet she did.
Knitting's very relaxing, apparently. Now, if you do arts and crafts, if you doodle and you do doodling, then something that you may use is a glue gun. Glue sticks things together, and a glue gun uses heat for connecting things together so that they stay together and don't come apart. So a glue gun is a tool that uses hot glue for crafting things.
Now, believe it or not, if you've ever been to Britain or Ireland, you'll know it rains a hell of a lot. But it was traditional in the past for roofs, the top of a house, to be made of dried straw. So straw is grass, and then you dry it so it becomes hard. And they call that thatch, and they put it on the top, or they used to put it on the top of a house, not many these days. That roof was a thatched roof. And of course, it's a very, very highly skilled craft. Not many people know how to do it. But if you do know about thatching, you are a thatcher, not Margaret Thatcher, not the famous prime minister, but I guess somebody in her family many generations before her did it, and that's why her family got the name. So a thatcher is a person who can make thatched straw roofs.
Yeah, maybe she should have stuck to thatching roofs, might have been a better occupation. Scrapbooks. What's a scrapbook? A scrapbook is a book, and inside this book you can paste with glue a range of different things, photographs, perhaps different coloured paper, different newspaper cuttings, things that you cut out of a magazine or a newspaper. And I remember back in the day when I was at school, it was a lot of fun to create a scrapbook. You could create a family scrapbook with anything that was connected to your family, just paste or glue things inside the book or album. That's scrapbooking, creating decorated albums with photos and different memories inside a scrapbook.
So those are some words, the most important words we think in the world of arts and crafts. There are more, of course, but let's look at some idioms now. So just to remind you, an idiom is when you use words in a figurative way, not the literal way, so they don't have their original meaning. For example, to draw the line. Well, anybody can draw a line. Take a pencil and draw a line. Okay, but that's not what this idiom means. The idiomatic use of draw the line means to set a limit on what is acceptable. For example, imagine my son says to me, I have a 15-year-old boy, and he says, Dad, I want to come home later tonight at 11 o'clock. He usually comes home before 10. And I say, okay, it's Saturday night. You're going to come home at 11 o'clock. Yeah, and I want to come back with my girlfriend. And I say, okay, she can come and she can stay for half an hour, then she has to go home. And he thinks, oh, wow, this is really easy. So he says, yeah, and we're going to drink a bottle of vodka together. And I say, no, you're not going to do that. I draw the line there.
That's going over the line, isn't it?
That's too far. I will let you come home later. You can bring your girlfriend with you. But no, I draw the line at alcohol. You're 15 years old. I'm not going to let you drink alcohol in my house. There is where I draw the line. That's where I set the limit.
Yeah, there's been lots of criticism of humour recently, hasn't there, with the woke left saying there are many things that you can't tell jokes about, and I don't necessarily agree with a lot of that. But where I draw the line is making jokes about people's disabilities. I think that's very cruel, so that's where I draw the line as far as humour's concerned. Our next idiom concerning arts and crafts is to paint yourself into a corner. Now, you're not going to put paint on your body. Again, this is an idiom. The individual words don't reflect the meaning of the idiom. If you paint yourself into a corner, then you're putting yourself in a very difficult situation by things that you have done, by your own actions. Let's say, for example, you leave your job. You hate your job. You can't stand working for this company, and you leave. But you leave before you find another job. So you're unemployed. You have no income. You've painted yourself into a corner. You're trapped. There's no way out. You need to find a job. You shouldn't have left your job before you found another one.
Now, I am not a potter. I am not skilled in the art of pottery. However, I do like to potter. I'd better explain myself. I like to potter, or you can say potter around. You can make it a phrasal verb by adding the preposition around. It's not pottery. If you potter around, or simply if you potter as a verb, it means you do this and that. That means nothing in particular, one thing, then another thing, another little thing, nothing really important. And you do it in an unhurried way, a slow way. If you act like this, you are a potterer. Not a potter. A potter makes things with clay, remember? But a potterer, Potterer, E-R-E-R at the end, that's me. I'm a potterer. I like to potter around. What about you, Craig? Are you a potterer?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, if I've got time on my hands, I like to potter about and tidy things up and look at things and do nothing in particular, just move around and, just pass the time by pottering around. Now, Reza mentioned earlier in the podcast that it was my birthday recently at the end of last month. And thank you to everybody who actually knew, listeners to the podcast who sent me good wishes. I got quite a few of those. So thank you so much if you did send me a birthday wish. But I must say that the cake we had today with coffee, Reza, was a work of art.
I agree.
It wasn't made with paint or glue.
Thank goodness.
It wasn't knitted, but it looked so nice and it looked so pretty and it was wonderful. So something very beautiful, something well made, something handmade. You can say that it's a work of art, even if it's not an actual work of art using paint or something similar. So something can be a work of art if it's just well done or looks impressive. Do you think this podcast is a work of art?
I like to think so. What do you think?
I don't know. I wouldn't like to blow my own trumpet.
Now, a work of art such as the Mona Lisa, probably the most famous painting in the world, actually started off as a blank canvas. It started off as nothing. So the canvas is the piece of cloth, the material that the artist is going to paint on. And before they paint anything at all, it's blank. It's a blank canvas. So as an idiom, metaphorically, a blank canvas is something with no content and also no restrictions. It can be developed or filled with creativity in any way. Perhaps when Leonardo da Vinci started, he thought, well, what will I draw? Will I draw a rabbit? Will I draw a bowl of fruit? Let me see. I can't think. A very pretty young lady walked past. He thought, no, I'm going to draw her. So that inspired him. And so the blank canvas became the Mona Lisa. Who knows? But the idiomatic expression means there's no restrictions or no content. You can do whatever you want on a blank canvas.
That's really what happened to us when we moved to Spain, wasn't it? If you move to a new city or country, you can say that you're starting off with a blank canvas. You have no connection to the place. You're starting from scratch, you can say, with a blank canvas. Have you seen the Mona Lisa?
No, I haven't. Do you recommend it?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you thought her eyes were following you around the room, because some people say they do. I didn't notice that.
I think I've noticed it even just looking on internet, never mind in the flesh. I think they do from what I've seen.
It captures your imagination. It's something special about it, but there's usually so many people around it that it's difficult to kind of get close enough to appreciate it. Our final idiom is one we have mentioned before on this podcast, and it's to be as mad as a hatter. You won't be surprised to know that a hatter used to be a very common profession, and it's a person who makes hats. So makes hats by hand. And this idiom, if you're as mad as a hatter, then you're a crazy person. You really are crazy. You really are mad. And I think it came from the materials that they used to use to make the hats. I can't remember if it was mercury or lead or something in the glue that the hatters used to make the hats that was really bad for the hatter and turned them crazy and turned them mad. I think it was mercury, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. So it was a chemical that they used a lot. Most hatters tended to have strange, dysfunctional personality traits because of these chemicals. So as mad as a hatter, very crazy.
Like the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland.
Right. Craig, have you ever made something handmade yourself?
Yes, when I was at school, I made a couple of things. I remember making a pencil case out of wood where the top slid open and slid closed. It took me about a year, and it never really opened and closed properly because I wasn't very good with my hands. I also made a pipe rack, which is like a stand where if you smoked a pipe and put tobacco inside a pipe and you had more than one pipe, then you could arrange your pipes on this pipe rack that took me about 8 months to make. But my dad didn't smoke a pipe, neither did my mum, so it was a pretty useless thing to make anyway. But everybody in the class had to make this pipe rack.
Not many people you could give it to as a present these days. If only you came across Sherlock Holmes, you could give it to him, perhaps.
Yeah, someone who's actually smoked a pipe. Did you make anything at school?
Exactly the same pencil case as you. I think it was a classic. Virtually every boy I know of a certain age made that at school.
Did you make an ashtray?
Not an ashtray, no, but I made that, and I made a fruit bowl.
Oh.
And I thought my fruit bowl was really cool, and I was a bit annoyed that my mum would never use it. But years later, I figured out why. It's because the varnish kept running on it. It's like, you don't want to...
What's varnish?
Varnish is that, not exactly paint, but it's something you put on a wooden product, a handmade product, after you've made it. It stops the wood from changing color.
It's quite shiny, isn't it?
Protects it, yeah. And it's a protective layer, and it gives it a particular color. But the problem is I didn't apply the varnish very well. So, when my mum did try to use it as a fruit bowl, but she got a bit tired of her apples having varnish on them.
You had very shiny apples and bananas.
It's probably a good thing she didn't use it, because if not, I would probably be as mad as a hatter by now from eating all that varnish. I'm sure it couldn't be good for you.
So what do you think, Reza? Do you think these days children should learn arts and crafts at school, or is their time better invested in learning things like computer programming and artificial intelligence?
They can do both. I see no reason at all why children shouldn't learn arts and crafts. They should, but they should also learn about computers. Both, I think. What about you?
Yes, I agree. I think even though it might be a bit dated, that, really do we need children making pencil cases and ashtrays? I think it's useful because it's something that technology can't really create. I think there's a lot of value in creating something and making something by hand, and you get attached to the object that you make. It has some intrinsic value because you didn't just buy it in a shop. You actually spent time making it. And I think that has a lot of value.
Now, listeners, it's your turn to practice your English. What kind of arts and crafts do you enjoy? Or are your kids doing arts and crafts at school? Do you think it's a valid subject for them to learn? Let us know what you think. You could send us a voice message. There's a link in the show notes to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. And Craig, if people want to write to us...
Yes, you can send your emails to me if you have a comment or question. I'm Craig, CRAIG, @inglespodcast.com. And if you want to write to Reza, his address is Belfast Reza, Belfast, the city in Northern Ireland, and Reza, REZA, @gmail.com.
If you're a Spanish speaker and you want to improve your English with free or paid resources, you could visit the Mansión Inglés website. The address is mansioningles.com. And also, specifically for paid products, you can browse the online store. That's at store, that's store.mansioningles.net.
And before we go out the door this week, we can't say goodbye without thanking our lovely Patreon supporters who every month support this podcast. We usually mention people who have recently joined the program, but there hasn't been anyone this month. However, we do have a long list of people supporting us, and we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. You can also join our Patreon program if you're not already a member, and by doing so you get instant access to the transcriptions of this podcast and the occasional live Zoom chat with me so that you can informally practice your speaking. For more information, go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Ingles podcast.
Craig, what are we going to talk about in next week's episode?
At the moment, we have absolutely no idea, so we're waiting for you to get in touch, send us a voice message, and give us your suggestions. What would you like us to talk about next week? Until then, have a wonderful week. Thanks for listening. It's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.